which means we'll have to share. Sit wherever you guys sit together, though.
Borg mind.
Well, these guys are a pair. They're a duo. And, you know, I have a thing about critics who work with other critics as a duo. And I had invited one of them, and then the other said, but you should have me. I'm better and funnier.
It's true.
So
I am better and funnier.
They're ruining right now that they don't have Greg Cott here. So, Andrew, let's start with you. Real briefly,
okay.
Who are you? What do you do?
What's up, everyone? Thanks for coming out, first and foremost. My name is Andrew Barber. I run a website called FakeshoreDrive.com. We cover the local hip-hop scene. We also cover the Midwest. You know, we write about a lot of different things within the hip-hop community. We throw events, concerts, a lot of different things, but that's pretty much it for that.
Excellent.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Zupko. I'm the founder, editor, and publisher of PopMatters.com. We've been around since 1999, and we're one of the world's largest independent cultural analysis and criticism sites.
And Sarah, you don't write anymore. You're mainly an editor.
Yeah, exactly. And publisher.
Publisher.
I run the business side.
Major domo.
Yeah.
That means you're rich, like Ryan Schreiber of Pitchfork.
No.
Okay. LaShawn?
Hi, everybody. My name is LaShawn Williams. I am the editor for the Arts and Culture section of GapersBlock.com. Hello.
My name is Drew Hunt. I'm on staff at the Chicago Reader, where I contribute film reviews. I also contribute to Slant Magazine and have contributed to Popstash.com and a couple of other places. I also blog intermittently, and that's about it. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Donna Seaman. I'm the book person up here. I'm a senior editor of Booklist, which has been around for over 100 years. I also write for the Tribune and other places.
I'm Kris Vire of TimeOut Chicago, the former magazine, now website. I'm the theater editor there, and moderated the online discussion that Jim was just talking about 5 years ago.
My name's Duncan, MacKenzie, and this is Richard Holland, and we are bad at sports. We do contemporary art.
Really cool blog.
And savage.
I'm Leah Pickett. I write about popular culture for WBEZ, film and music for Popstash.com, and I'm a dining contributor to the Chicago Tribune as well.
I'm Jim Kopeny. I picked up the name Tankboy somewhere in the mid-'90s for a slightly unknown reason. I read about music.
I always wanted to ask you, was that because Tank Girl was big at that point?
I was really into Deadline comics, and I read the Tank Girl stuff, and my first AOL name in 1995 was Tankboy.
Okay, all right.
So it's not a name I hide behind in order to savage bands. It's just a name that I got stuck with.
My name is Mike Sula. I am a food critic at the Chicago Reader.
Who has to appear incognito.
And that's how he looks all the time, too. He comes to staff meetings like that.
Fucking
I've never seen his face.
It is a good look. He's cooler than us already.
I'll bet Richard wrestles him for $10.
What are you talking about, Jim? I look like this all the time.
You know that food is the new rock and roll. So you're the coolest person on the panel, and you've got the mask to prove it.
You better trademark that quickly.
I know. We should all have masks. I should note that Drew and Leah were students of mine, two of the best writing students I had in reviewing the arts at Columbia. And I am unfailingly honest to my students, and I tell them relentlessly that they probably never will be paid to do this. I think most of us who are paid, and pay is really relative, let me tell you. The busboy here tonight might be doing better. I never thought we'd get paid to do it, and now I think this chance is even more dire. But then two things brighten my attitude from time to time when I remember them. Is that, you know, a year ago, this semester, last year, you guys were in the desks, and now you're doing it. Right? And it's slave labor, but you're getting published, and that's phenomenal. And the other thing, every time I feel bad that critics don't get no respect, everybody hates us, we got to eat a worm, all that. So Jim DeRogatis is a douchebag. Is, I mean, it was only 2 weeks ago, right, that this city and this entire country mourned more, certainly more than the United Kingdom mourned the death of Maggie Thatcher, for a guy who sat in the dark and wrote about movies. How phenomenal is that? Right. Wrote very smartly and passionately. And so, you know, really this night... For years and years. Many of us are here tonight because of Roger. So this should be for Roger. So why don't we hear from the two youngest panelists first? How the hell did you pull this off? How is it that you have a job when everybody says it can't be done anymore?
Blind luck and a little bit of extra ambition, I suppose. I have no idea. I definitely feel very lucky. I don't know if it's necessarily a testament to my ability, although I believe in my ability, but I do think a lot of it is timing. A lot of it is kind of being I was an intern at the Reader as I was graduating college, and they were lucky to have a position there for me, and I kind of, lucked into it that way. And the editor over there, J.R. Jones, believed I was good enough to contribute, and that's sort of how I looked out there. But it really was kind of a right place, right time kind of thing. And then but I don't want to sell myself short. I worked hard. I did my thing.
And Leah, I mean, you came from Texas. You wanted to be Roger Ebert. You wanted to write about movies no matter what. And now it's only a year after getting out of school, and you're doing it.
Yeah, I came to Chicago with a copy of I hated this movie in my backpack, and I remember I got to the Chicago theater and I saw the star there, and I stood on it, and I was like, one day, and I was maybe a little too hopeful about it, or maybe not, but I got to say, Drew, I've been reading your reviews for a long time, but when we were both at Columbia, I would read you, and I was like, oh, he's really good, I hope he makes it. I honestly used to think that, yeah, I mean, everyone asks me, like, how did you get this job? And, like, I wish I had your job. I'm like, I don't know if you really want this job. Like Jim was saying, it's not the most lucrative career. But I wouldn't trade it for anything else. This is what I want to do, and I love it, and I'm happy.
All right. Let's throw it out to the older panelists. What distinguishes criticism as professional? Well, we're all older than them. They're like 22. That's all I mean. All of us are. I have underwear older than them. I mean,
now that's scary.
Yeah, well,
little TMI.
Thrifty. What distinguishes professional criticism? Kris, start us off. What is a professional critic versus the amateur who is just writing passionately about his or her opinions about art?
Well, I think that's a question to which the answer has evolved very quickly. Very greatly over the last decade or two. As we discussed 5 years ago, the rise of internet platforms that are easily accessible, whether it be putting up a Blogspot blog or a Yelp ID or what have you, has enabled anybody and everybody to disseminate their opinions. And the sort of print media gatekeepers are not as powerful as they once were. I think there are a lot of people who disseminate opinion as a hobby, but what separates the sort of amateurs from professionals, I would say, is one thing is the ability to contextualize. I think that's one thing that sort of, citizen reviewers address whether or not something, a movie, a restaurant, play, a book, whatever, met their own expectations and needs, and a professional critic is able to tell you, meaning anyone who reads it, whether it will meet what you want, I think. That's a very roundabout way of saying that.
Okay, so context, one thing. Mike, we all eat. What makes you more knowledgeable? I eat a lot, obviously. It's been noticed. What makes you more qualified?
I eat a lot. I eat quite a bit. I also cook. And I spent, a very short period in my early lifetime working in the food industry. Probably, a lot of the chefs that I review today would scoff at actually what I did. I worked at a hot dog stand, but I'm going to claim it. I'm going to put it on my resume. But I do eat a lot, and one of the primary things is, you must travel a lot, and you have to be open to everything. I think that probably applies across all of our disciplines. You just have to have an open mind and be willing to accept everything in its context. And you have to be aware of its context, like Kris was saying.
Yeah. I mean, the amateur critic can make a career, paid or not, out of just writing about Game of Thrones, all right? But if you're a TV critic, you've got to see everything from Face Off, the reality show on Sci-Fi, to Mad Men and everything else, right?
Both great shows.
They kind of are. That's why
Just
I dropped
saying,
them.
I'm in contemporary art. I don't know.
Sarah, what makes the professionals different than the amateurs?
Well, there's a couple things. One, I think you have to be able to move beyond yourself in a review, you know, and not just make it about, well, I like this, I like that. You know, who cares? Because really, at the end of the day, what people are reading about is the cultural product, not you. So I think that's really important. I think it's really important to have historical knowledge of whatever you're writing about. I mean, if you're writing music reviews, if you're doing electronic music, you should know the artists that came before. You should know how, you know, what you're covering fits within the history of that music and how maybe it points to some trends going forward. Basically, you have to know a lot of stuff. You have to really study.
Yeah.
You have to study the past of culture to understand, you know.
Andrew, how does that work for you? Because I find that in hip-hop, reinvents itself every 5 years.
Right.
I mean, I was talking about how cool I was to the class last week because Chuck D had tweeted something I didn't even remember writing. I don't maybe
Really?
Hot wrote it. Yeah. He said, it was something about I don't even know. I can't even quote it because I didn't remember writing it. So Chuck, and I was bragging, and then there was nothing. You know, I mean, you want this much back, right? And there was nothing. And I said, do you know who Chuck D is?
They didn't know who Chuck D is.
One person volunteered that he'd been a Beastie Boy.
Are you serious?
I mean, these are you guys.
Wasn't he a liberal talk show host?
Yeah, short-lived. How do you deal with it when the art form is so young and new and people don't? I mean, old school they think is something 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy to hear people say Jay-Z is old school now. I mean, that's
okay,
Chuck D's a dinosaur at this
are we
point.
sitting outside a barber shop? This is like old man talk. Like, I remember back in the day when...
Well, you guys presumably know who Da Vinci was, right?
I know who Jay-Z is.
I think he has 99 problems.
He used to move snowflakes by the OZ.
I mean, hip-hop is a young man's game. I mean, there's no question about that, but it's old now. It's 30 years old, so people have grown up with it. People have grown with it. So where does it go? Where's it going? Where's it been? And I think a lot of the young artists nowadays who have been successful are the ones that study what has come before them and righted those wrongs, or capitalized on what their forefathers' mistakes have been.
I don't know. You think Chief Keef paid any attention to Tupac or Biggie? He still thinks it's cool to play with guns, and they're both dead.
Okay. No, but the person writing about it should.
Yeah, right. So
10 minutes in, and Chief Keef hits the conversation. Finally.
Already, we've only been.
You were waiting for that?
Chief Keef is already. I knew that was coming, but it's not to say we don't know how long his career is going to last. Is it going to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? We don't know.
Yeah.
So as a critic, you have to watch and see what did people like him before? What was their shelf life like?
Yeah. Nothing ages faster in pop music than novel.
I mean, hip hop goes like this.
Yeah.
Some people are here today, gone tomorrow. So you kind of have to look at how smart are their managers, how smart are their moves, what kind of music are they making, are they staying relevant?
Gotcha.
I mean, it's complicated. It's a lot of different things. But.
LaShawn, Sarah was saying about it's not just personal opinion. It's not just one of the things I love about Gaber's Block is how well edited it is. That's partly due to you. You're editing the reviews. Is this a problem? Do you have to circle the I and take the first person out of everything that comes in over the transom?
Yeah, I learned that before I became editor. Someone put in the comment section of one of the writers' reviews, she basically, I don't know her, she basically scolded us for flip-flopping with our verb tense and that sort of thing. And so, as anal as I am, that was something. All I need is one bad comment, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to Google. I'm going to pull out all my English books and say, okay, she was right. She was wrong there. She was right there. So, what I am frustrated about, I'm going to be honest, it's a lot of bad writing out there. It's a lot. It is like I was at an event, the WVON 50th anniversary event. I covered it with people that I know, so I'm sneaky. I go back and read what they wrote compared to what I wrote and see that they hit something I didn't hit. And things were capitalized in the punctuation, and I'm like, really? And that makes it bad for little people like me and bloggers, I think, it makes it really, really bad for us because everybody thinks that everybody writes that way. And that's frustrating, and it has hampered me. A lot of events I've covered, a lot of assignments I've gotten, I've been placed way here on, at the end because she's just a blogger. It's not going to be good anyway. And I know they think that, and then they read it and they go, oh, wow.
Okay, so part of professionalism is context. Part of it is acting professionally, even if you are just a blogger.
Absolutely.
with good standards of editing and
Absolutely.
such. All right, boys. Where does context fit in for you as arts bloggers?
Well, one of the things that's been interesting, our project initially sort of started off as sort of a fuck-up, like, made in a bar sort of event. That's why it's called Bet at Sports, instead of something more fortunate than that.
It has a charm, though. Everybody who is good at art is bad
I
at
usually
sports.
say that it's got to be painful to be, like, 54 years old and still called The Edge, so that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's been interesting over time, our relationship to institutions. And how it's gone from, like, yeah, no, we're not going to talk to you, to, like, actively being sought out, because that is what's left of contemporary art criticism, really. There's a couple magazines, but I mean, there are almost zero full-time critics working for papers. I mean, it's just like, yeah.
Well, the city of Chicago no longer has an art critic.
No, right. But I mean, the entire nation has 4 or 5 full-time art critics. It's like the dodo.
Yeah.
So, I think that in a lot of ways, the sort of blogosphere and podcasts and whatever are the new face of legitimate, in terms of niche things like contemporary art. So over time, they've sort of had to be a little more gracious about it. And I think that they've come a long way in terms of taking us seriously as much as anybody should.
Well, I think you demand it. Duncan, when you're teaching at Columbia, right? How do you deal with this thing? I mean, art, we can go back to the Cro-Magnons and the cave paintings in France, right? I mean, you think it's hard to catch up with 50 or 60 years of rock history or 30 years of hip-hop history. How the heck do you catch up with history of art? And how do you deal with that when you're talking to students who want to write meaningfully about it?
That's an interesting question. I sort of think that you sidestep the question and you say, like, you again look to the context and say, okay, so to speak meaningfully about this painting, what do you need to kind of break down in terms of its history and its lineage and what it speaks to in terms of its own kind of manufactured context? I suppose you're like the philosophy major. Like you don't necessarily need to go back to Kant to read whatever's in your, whatever's in the New Yorker this month. But it might provide context. But you can't get through the canon. There's just no way. There's no human way that you can get through all of that history and unpack it all. So really, I mean, I think of it like we think about hip-hop criticism. Like, there's no way to kind of be all things to all spaces. So you've got to just try and do right by the scene. I mean, one of the things that Richard and I have talked about a lot over the last 8 or 9 years is that we write and talk for other art makers. We make stuff for and by us as a community, and that when we think about what we do in terms of criticism, we think of it a lot more like punditry. We don't have a generalist audience because we're going to talk about Derrida at some point, or we're going to cite some kind of specific but unknown artist who, if you are savvy, is totally cool.
Or like FUBU for boring white people.
Okay.
Faba.
Jim, I get this all the time. Are you a musician?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you a musicology student? Can you read and write music?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Well,
I played trumpet from second grade.
I should have asked you that before I got to... Yeah. I can't tell a C-sharp diminished from a hole in my ass, okay?
Yeah, I mean...
Is that necessary?
No.
What qualifies you to write about music?
I can pull the Greg Cott where it's like, and you go down a minor tone in the second verse. And it brings a new era of minuscule empathy to the listener. And that's complete bullshit.
Well, I know what you're like. I mean, we've been in the trenches together, Lollapalooza and Pitchfork, and I've been there with John Perellas, the head music critic in the New York Times, who is a musicologist, a PhD. And he sits there with his reporter's notebook, and he doesn't take notes in English. He writes out the staffs and the charts and notes so he can remember riffs that he thought were... I mean, you and I don't do that.
No. If I want to remember a riff, I go to a Guitar Center and I pick up a book and I do my bar chord, which is about all I can do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's rock and roll.
Okay.
I mean, I don't... Maybe that's how John remembers.
So then what qualifies?
That's probably how he does. It's the same way if you were to take a note. That's how he does it. He's like, oh my God, this riff in this song, that totally... now I remember what that brought out in my head at that particular moment.
Okay.
That's probably what he's doing.
All right, but as someone who is not half the musician that a brilliant genius like a Steve Vai is, or a Billy Joel, what gives you the right to criticize those talented artists?
Again, it's taking into context the past, but it's also, with music criticism, I truly believe that there is a gut instinct. There is something that you have to, like, reach down the throat of every single song you listen to and see what's deep inside of there. And you take that, and you have to take part of your emotional response, but then you have to take the cerebral part that kind of makes sense of everything that's going on. Because I always think about it this way. If I'm going to write about a song, or I'm going to write about an album, I'm going to do it in a way that somebody who's never heard of that band, has never heard that genre of music, if I can describe what it sounds like and bring them into the song without doing, recommended if you like the Smashing Pumpkins. If I can do it without doing that, then I think I've written possibly a successful piece of criticism. I think that if you can do it without having to give people a history lesson, if you could do it through, bringing them through the feeling of history without it being a class, I think that's a good way to approach it.
Sarah, how does that jive with the Pop Matters approach? Oh, Don, I keep forgetting. I got a really good one for you, though. That's your penalty for being a little late.
That's what I figured. Well, I mean, honestly, it's our requirements for our writers are basically write smart and write engaging. And there's a wide range of voices within that. I mean, you have people that give you a lot of history, I hope in an entertaining way, and you have other people that are more descriptive. It just really kind of depends on what kind of writer you are. I mean, like, for me, example, I've never been a really descriptive writer. I've always been more kind of contextual and like doing history work and things like that. So, we've got those different voices, but the key for us is just it has to have a point to it. There has to be some depth to the piece. And
you were the first one to talk much about writing yet, and that's a key. One of the things we read in my class is Oscar Wilde, The Critic as Artist. Oscar Wilde, tongue firmly in cheek, arguing for 30,000 interminable words that the critic is more important than the artist. Because with any old fool can create art, but the critic puts it in perspective. And then there's a piece by H.L. Mencken where he reads that the motive is the same. Both are trying to make the same point. Yeah. That's saying, we aren't up here to judge art. We're up here to make art. We're trying to do engaging writing. It just so happens we're writing about some piece of art in front of us. But what we're trying to do is write first and foremost, not tell you whether to buy, this Big Mac or this,
Well, that's the thing. Like with us, I mean, we don't see ourselves as product pitchmen the way I think a lot of smaller blogs kind of are.
Does anybody see themselves as a consumer
You know what?
guide?
That's actually a good thing. Chris earlier talked about the fact that the gatekeepers are falling by the wayside, and I think that's a good thing. I think critics should have never been gatekeepers to begin with. They should have been guides. And the fact that it's no longer in the hands of a couple exalted voices, I think that's great.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I don't think at any point in history criticism has considered itself a gatekeeper.
But I mean, like if you think about it, up until the digital revolution came, critics were sort of gatekeepers. Like every single publicist went through a critic. Most bands sent their stuff to a critic.
Sort of, but
most people found their stuff to critics.
That's definitely the way with hip hop. Absolutely, they're considered as gatekeepers, 100%.
Really?
Who gets on a blog? I mean, that can make or break if you get a record deal or not. And so that's total. I mean, it's a people look at hip hop blogs as gatekeepers.
But are those blogs that we're talking about, are they actual critical organs, or are they just...
they're more promotional tools.
Right.
Are they hype machines, if you will?
So there's the difference, what we're talking about, criticism versus,
And that is the majority of what's out.
Yeah. I mean,
marketplace,
But I think what's nice about the blog space is that you earn your credibility. And you put it on the line every time you step up to your keyboard or your microphone. Like, we have an audience because we built that audience and we've proven viable for them. And we've done so for 8 years and expanded to being one of the nation's biggest contemporary art blogs because we actually mean it and we put ourselves on the line every time.
Right. You have to consistently deliver the goods. Don, I'm not going to keep turning around to look at these tweets. So if you get a really good one up there and you think we should... which by Don Hall standards, he's already out back smoking and getting high, I'm sure. Oh, all right. So there's something really good. All right. So now, Donna, here's the million-dollar question.
Oh, my.
In addition to 2 weeks ago, an entire city, paying such accolades to Roger Ebert, this weekend, in the wake of Boston, no less, and the Newsweek from hell, right? Somebody writes a book review in the New York Times book review and sets this entire city on fire just because they dared to say that Chicago kind of sucks. Because of some things like 500 people getting shot here last year, and corruption and Emmanuel. They had some points in that piece.
She had some points. Rachel, I don't know how you pronounce her last name. So this was the front page of the New York Times book review. And unfortunately, there are so few book reviews left in this country, Sunday standalone. It's acquired even more power. And the front page review is a big deal. And this was not a review. This was definitely not a book review. And it wasn't really an essay either. It was a very sloppy, irresponsible, cranky piece of writing that had lots of errors and omissions in it. On the other hand, everyone's entitled to their opinions, and the fact that Rachel S. was critical of Chicago is fine. Who wouldn't be? But like any city, it has its good and its bad, and she seemed to be writing in some sort of bubble. So I feel the editors of the book review really failed on this piece. It was very poorly written. You can go through it and find one soft, icky thing after another, many contradictions. The books are given such short shrift, why bother with them?
Yeah.
If it was an essay, it needed to be seriously revised. There's no facts in there. And it had a very weird vibe, that as though she herself didn't know what she was saying. So had I edited it, I would have sent it right back and said, I think you need to go through this some more.
What are you trying to do
and maybe
here?
read these books again. And then on the inside cover, they do like a little Q&A with their featured reviewer. And all this woman could talk about was Sister Carrie, as though there's been no Chicago literature since then. And she seemed to think there weren't very many women writers in Chicago. I could give her a really long list of great women writers. So,
a couple of blogs already have. They've been,
absolutely. The response has been huge. And what irresponsibility not to give that whole assignment to a better Chicago writer when there's so many to choose from.
I think that actually brings up two good points. The first one is that I'm seeing something with editors throwing people out to the wolves with badly written critical pieces because they know it's going to get some huge backlash.
Well, I wonder
Secondly,
about that.
and it's page views.
I got that.
You
I got
had to
that
wonder.
3 or 4 times this morning.
But secondly, I think that was basically
trolling, looking for hits.
The city of Chicago now knows what it's like to read a comment section where there's a negative comment about itself, and she was basically trolling Chicago.
Well, it showed such a ignorance about the rest of the country. And I'm a former New Yorker, so I really look at this and go, God, get out of your little space once in a while. And that it just, what is most frustrating is that the books themselves are so disrespected. I mean, they were used as kind of like bait. And, that's a waste of all our time.
I totally think it was
and the
an
worst
editor rubbing
photo
his
you
hands
could
going,
ever
this
use
is going
of
to be
Chicago.
so great.
No, but the fact that we all read that says a lot. I mean, they got the page views. They hit their numbers this month.
Well, and I also am over the story, right? I mean, I think that people need to stop validating it by talking about it in some ways, because it's like it's sort of egging on further trolldom. It's like a shitty review by a shitty writer, and let's move on. I mean, who cares?
Well, it was the New York Times book review.
But it also calls
because
into
it's New York Times doesn't mean it isn't shitty sometimes.
It also calls into question the motives for publishing a piece like that. I mean, you have to wonder if the editors of the New York Times were thinking, well, this is a really shitty argument, but it's going to get a lot of attention.
I think the clickbait thing has become a huge thing for critics, especially the ones wanting to get noticed. Like, I'm just going to put something out there that's really crazy and it's thoughtfully written. Maybe I don't have enough to back it up, but I know people are going to click on that and leave a lot of negative comments, and I guess any attention is good enough for me.
Well, I think not. I mean, I know what you're saying, and that's my suspicion, but, how absurd to sacrifice everything you fight for in criticism and to, misuse your influence. Like,
but
I
feel like
that's a whole publishing strategy, the Gawker Group.
We all check in on Gawker,
though.
right? Like, and I wondered about the editorial space, if this doesn't have something to do with the gutting of the economic model, right? Like, the editor feels like the most disposable space in the interwebs, where you're like, we got content, we got audience, what's in between them? Can we get rid of that? That layer that demands rigor or punctuation?
Yeah, exactly.
And anybody that does that ends up getting fired. Look at Maura, who got fired from the Village Voice because she dared to actually try to write intelligent musical criticism instead of doing clickbait that's basically galleries of 17 different photos with one sentence underneath each one that is the story.
Everybody got fired from the Village Voice, though, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, but it's
the
happening
Village
all
Voice
around.
is
I mean,
like
LA
a
Times
joke
got rid
at
of
this
David Greenwald. Everybody in the music industry is losing their critic jobs because they're not willing to do total clickbait. Even somebody like Matthew Perpetua has gone way low and is now working for BuzzFeed doing galleries of goofy faces that Florence from Florence and the Machine.
Well, Leah, we both write for the WBEZ blogs, and I love Tim dearly. He's not here, though, so I'll diss him. Trisha I love more. Trisha's here. Every morning, we get that fucking list of the top 10 blog hits the day before. I hate that. I hate that. Sometimes you've got a very complicated story that's not going to get a lot of hits, but it's going to lay the ground for a piece down the road. Or sometimes, how do you feel about that as a young writer? Do you feel like I'm not going to have my gig long if I don't get hits?
Well, I will say this about Tim. He does say, now that's not the only thing we take into consideration.
Yeah, he says that, but he sends us the damn list every day.
Yeah. So, but it's very anxiety provoking because you feel like I gotta get to the top of that list, you know, and it's page views. So, and I've noticed I don't intentionally do this. Sometimes I just want to write something that really kind of like stirs my bones. But I notice that I get the most page views on controversial topics. And actually, the ones when I write about sex, people like to click on them because they think, ooh, there's going to be something really salacious in there, and there really isn't. But they think that there's going to be, and I don't think I'm misleading them in that fact that just the title of a movie or a book that is about sex, and then they click on it and see there's no smutty pictures, they click away, which is really irks me.
I think BEZ needs more smutty pictures. I think that you folks at NPR, WBEZ, Chicago Public Media, et cetera, just need to get on your website and say, I think MP3 should be free. Because remember what happened to that?
I think Greg Cott and I have said that every week
remember
for 7 years.
What happened to the blogger for NPR?
Oh, yeah. That was
who
also
like,
a big explosion.
David Lowery, was burning her in effigy. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, wait, let me hear from Mike. One thing that strikes me right now, I made that joke before about chefs are the new rock stars, but really, right now it seems like the world's eyes are on Chicago as a food mecca in the way that a million years ago they were on Napa or Sonoma, and not that long ago they were on Barcelona, right? Are you getting that sense, and what is that like to compete on that level? I mean, we had this in music for 10 minutes in the 90s, Smashing Pumpkins, Liz Phair, Veruca Salt. How are you feeling as a food writer in Chicago now that other critics are looking at this city?
Well, that stuff happens so fast, and a different city is invoked pretty much every 6 months. But I will say that we've had a lot of attention for a sustained amount of time. It's a privilege. I feel honored and lucky to be able to be in this situation right now and write about it. However, I do eat a lot of meals that I wish I hadn't. I mean, it's not all. Do
they involve foam?
No, man. That's all gone. I mean, it's really heavy.
All critics eat a lot of shit, but you're taking it that extra step and actually like going the distance.
Yeah, it's actually manifesting itself on my body. You guys look great. I'm dying.
We've got a good lipo guy. I'll give you his card.
Well,
is this recorded?
God, I hope
not. Because I feel like I'm going to play that back for my wife when I get home.
There's a lot of hype surrounding the Chicago restaurant scene, like there is in any other city, and like there is in any other aspect of Chicago arts. I mean, I almost hate to even call the Chicago restaurant scene and food culture an art scene because it straddles that in a way. I mean, food is something that's necessary for us to survive, whereas other things, you guys might argue, other things are not immediately. And yet, it can rise to sort of an artistic level.
God damn you, sir. I'm sure that we all need paintings to survive.
Andrew, what about the national critocracy descends on Chicago to weigh in on Chief Keef? Because you're too young to have been through Kanye West, right?
Well, I wasn't. The site wasn't around for Kanye.
Right. So you weren't writing and doing.
I wasn't
this
writing then, but I was here.
But you were, and everybody was quoting you on Keef.
Yeah, right. I mean, Chicago hip hop was the hottest it's been since Kanye, and even hotter than Kanye. 12 artists got major label deals in 2012, and it's great that the city has all this attention on it. And we've been dying for this kind of attention. The Midwest has been totally underserved when it comes to hip hop, but now it's like, okay, now we have the deals. What are we going to do with it? Are you going to actually get your physical product in stores? Are you going to actually come out? Or are you just going to sit on a shelf? So the hype is there. Now how do you deliver on it? I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to now at this point.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's been justified? That record is not...
The only album to come out so far out of everybody that's been signed was Chief Keef's.
Right.
I know you loved it. I read
Yeah, I did. No, I did not like it. No.
and
it did not set the world on fire.
No,
I mean,
and it didn't, but...
I have a problem with the nihilism. I just have a problem with this view that, and plus it's played out. It's a cliche.
Right.
You know, we've seen guys bragging about how big their gun is for 30 years, and it was old by the time you got to Niggers for Life in 1991 by NWA, and keeps doing the same thing at the same time that 500 kids died last year.
Straight Outta Compton is now oldies.
People got
it is. It's old school, baby. It's old.
Like oldies. Like it qualifies for the oldies station.
Ancient history.
Like Light FM.
I know.
And next to Up
AM radio. People were kind of got tired of that and thought it didn't work. And so now you're going to see a shift. So it's like Chance the Rapper is the hottest new artist in Chicago as far as the hip hop is concerned. And he has a totally different message and a totally different vibe. So
like all those Treated Crew people too.
Right. There's there's a lot of different sounds going on. The Chief Keef thing, I mean, it did okay. It's still going, but now I think people are trying to see what's next. And so, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting year.
He needs to do some more YouTube videos admitting to criminal behavior or actually doing criminal behavior on the YouTube video, because I think it's great PR for him.
I have no comment.
Pitchfork and hand over the tapes, admitted that they're pressed.
DeRogatis?
Yes.
This is a tweet you just walked into. Andy
Yes.
Mitchell. Andy Mitchell says, I know what Jim DeRogatis thinks of Pitchfork becoming a brand with a festival and a video channel. What do the others think?
It's a very good idea, and Andrew has some experience with this as well, because you guys do some promotional stuff that isn't criticism. What do we think about a critical org? I mean, Pitchfork is the most successful musical startup since Rolling Stone in 1967. Can we take their criticism, though? Can we take their precious 7.2 rating, which is very different than a 7.3? Can we accept that as unbiased and honest, an emotional reaction from the critic, intellectually backed up? Can we accept that when they're booking that artist at their festival in Paris or in Union Park? There's a blurring of the lines a lot, most of us don't sponsor film fests, or, I mean, Sound Opinions shows movies, right? But we don't write about movies. We write about music. We don't present bands unless it's for free, and then you can come and hear us interview them. But most of us don't actually have a role in promoting the art we criticize. How does everybody feel about that is the question.
The game has changed.
Why? Why is that okay, though?
Blogs have brought that barriers down of what it is. I mean, criticism has completely changed, and, the internet has changed everything.
And
basically.
The labels love it, because then you do your jobs for them. I mean, you're doing their jobs.
A&Rs, they just call me and ask me to give them information. I mean, they don't have to come here and do work anymore. It's just pretty crazy.
Yeah, just the mention keeps them relevant, and that's ultimately what they want.
How do you feel about that as an editor, LaShawn?
But isn't Pitchfork more trying to curate a lifestyle, too? Like, they're more than just trying to... Pitchfork is a frame of mind.
They're putting a bird on it?
If you could say, yeah, they could put whatever they want on anything.
That'd be funny if Pitchfork was actually some sort of hipster indie lifestyle anymore, but it's not. It's the mainstream.
Yeah, it's nothing like that. It is nothing. It is Rolling Stone now.
Yeah, it's more relevant than Rolling Stone is.
And so I think that...
And it's, you know what, it's a lot like Rolling Stone, how Jan Wenner controlled the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for so many years and decided who got in and who didn't. How's that any different from what Ryan Trevor's doing today?
Rolling Stone in his heyday is Pitchfork in his heyday, but music festivals as they are now didn't exist in Rolling Stone's heyday. So I think
the Pitchfork, they can't.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be now,
If you're an
Donna?
artist, they can't change.
Donna, in a million years, you would not have a publishing company when you're reviewing books, and Kris, you would not have a theater,
but
a storefront theater, would you?
But here's the thing: when I write about books, I really want people to read. And I want to call attention to works of literature that are important and part of your life. So there is an advocacy aspect, but I really don't think of it as commercial.
You're not cashing a check from Knopf.
And no. And I'm thinking that I mean, for me, we were talking about writing earlier, and of course when you're writing about writing, it's a very literary endeavor, and so you want to be part of this great conversation that goes way back. I mean, you mentioned Oscar Wilde, we've talked about Dorothy Parker, there's Virginia Woolf, there's John Updike. I mean, you know, you want to look at it that way, and I don't care what people are reading it on. I still want that quality and to write with that depth and to be tapping into the reason we love what we do, which is that it nourishes us, whether it's food or books or music or film, and that's a really soulful thing. And so if it helps a writer, and you know, we all hear from people whose work we love and they're grateful because there's so much talk out there. If someone takes the time to write carefully and responsibly and ethically about something they care about, the artist is really grateful, even if you have criticisms in it, to be taken seriously and to be talked about on that level, not just moving products.
Yeah. Well put. Every time my class reads, I'm sorry, Chris. Every time my class reads Kris Vire's piece from TimeOut Chicago, their favorite critic is always Donna. Always Donna, right? And you've come and talked to my class. I appreciate it. What were you going to say, Chris?
No, of course you're right that you know, while I'm in this position, I'm not going to be running a theater company of my own. But you know, working in theater, in a medium that is so inherently local and close-knit, you develop relationships, of course, and as...
Like any beat reporter.
Yeah, and as both editor and, you know, assigning editor and a critic myself, I do my best to keep a close rein on any potential conflicts of interest. But that said, I think that there are ways in which, you know, even at TimeOut, that we... You know, we don't run a music festival, but we do other things. We have like our...
You were the official publication of Lollapalooza,
yeah.
which I did 10 rounds with Frank Sinnon on about
absolutely.
the propriety of that.
And we, you know, we run the annual Eat Out Awards, which we just had our event last week, which is a thing that sort of promotes TimeOut and the restaurants that get the awards and votes and nominations all at the same time in an intertwined way. You know, I've had some talks with folks about doing some kind of theater awards that would be, you know, reader voted and...
Well, and St. Roger did the film fest in Champaign, and it was about promoting those films. So
it's not like it's curating taste, like it's like these websites and these magazines or whatever. They're bastions of taste and they're taste makers, and so why would they not want to have something that kind of celebrates the things that they're celebrating? Yeah. Well, it's just an extension of their...
But because I have to be suspect, though, of what Pitchfork writes about R. Kelly now that Pitchfork closes the festival this year with R. Kelly. Are they going to do in their news?
And now we've hit the R. Kelly beef that Jim had. If we can get to Congress, we've got a trifecta.
Wire and Brian Eno. Now I've covered everything. There you go. I'm done. We're done.
Hey, here in Chicago,
do you not agree with me?
We support our child molesters.
You know,
but Mel Reynolds.
I'd have to go back and look at what Pitchfork's written about R. Kelly in the past, because I know a lot of Pitchfork writers, and I know a lot of them genuinely love R. Kelly, and they love the shit out of Trapped in the Closet.
So how do you feel about them booking?
I mean, you know, as more publications have come out, there's more competition, so there has to be more revenue streams, and I feel like that is what it is. I mean, you know, Rolling Stone at one point was the only game in town, and for hip hop, The Source was the only game in town. You see, they extended their brand with things like the Source Awards, and you know, then Double XL comes along, and then blogs come along. So there's people aren't making as much money. The big dogs aren't, because everybody else wants a piece of the pie, so they have to extend their brands. And it might be doing concerts, it might be doing events, things of that nature. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a business.
You guys make no money whatsoever, right?
I was talking about this idea where we talk about contemporary art, a space in which people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get graduate degrees without any expectation of a job ever. And we never expected it to be a business, and we run a very messy organization, and I think of it. And I don't know how Richard feels, but I think of it like more like punditry. Like everybody who works for us, most of us have graduate degrees in the field that we talk about. Most of us still make stuff in a kind of art context. So,
but it's not your day job.
No, well, my day job is teaching at Columbia College. We already introduced that.
Mine too now.
Richard's day job is lawyering. I mean, we have a very funny relationship that way to kind of money and how we think about the kind of soft edges of what we do, because we think, like, fuck it, as long as we're honest, we can do whatever we want. And as long as we're open about it, our credibility comes out of our utility to our audience, and their ability to see our side of the thing and our kind of ability to translate these experiences of artworks into a language which aids them in their world.
So am I the only one on the panel who thinks it's wrong to be a critical organ that champions an artist and then makes money by booking that artist? You're with why? Help me, Sarah.
Because it's double jeopardy.
Well,
I mean, I understand that.
It's not like, okay, you know, the editors on your staff pick a bunch of movies that you like and you just kind of show them to people, and it's kind of a low budget affair. With Pitchfork, they make the bulk of their money from the festivals, not from the website.
Well, they make a lot of money on the website.
I know
too.
I know they make a lot of money.
I don't think that's true. I think they
well,
make the bulk
why
of
would
the
we
money
fault
off
them?
of
Even if they
advertising.
made a lot of money from the festival, why would we fault them for trying to keep their website alive when criticism is going the way of the dodo? Like, why is that such a necessary evil?
Well, I don't know. Finish your thought. Where were you going?
Well, I think they're in the business of trying to create stars. And, you know, then you wind up creating stars that you can then feature at big music festivals. I don't know. It's kind of it feels like a gray area to me.
You know, I'm no fan of Pitchfork, and I'll be honest about that. I find them to be kind of full of themselves, but I really don't think that's their mission. I don't think that Ryan thinks about creating stars. I think Ryan thinks about the fact that he loves this artist and he wants to see this artist do well, but I don't think there's any sort of like malicious intent, and I don't think he tells his critics what to write.
No.
He doesn't tell, there are lower editors that assign those things, and they give them free reign, and they get I know the number systems come up by like a panel, but the criticism itself is coming from the writer, and nobody's telling what to do. I mean, I almost wish somebody was editing them a little bit more, because the pieces might be a little bit more readable and shorter.
A lot of them were just struggling, trying to get in the game and make a name for themselves, period.
That's a really important point about accountability, that you can't, if you have reviewers and you're an editor, you can't change their opinions to fit some agenda. And when you're reviewing, you can't worry about those things. And you know, you were talking too about keeping some distance and conflict of interest. I mean, you do have to be careful about that. You become part of this world. I interview a lot of writers, but I don't get involved, you know, personally, so that I can remain as objective as possible. So, you know, it is a gray area, and there's a lot of kind of blurring of that. But, you know, you do build in your ethics, and there are ethics about this. And there's lots of times, you know, at the magazine where it happened to me today, where someone asked about a review, and it was very critical. And I know that it had something to do with a pending ad, but that's it. So it goes, and you let it go. And that's where your integrity comes in.
One of the things that always amazes me... Were you going to say something, Chris? Because you were...
Yeah.
One of the things that always amazes me is how the net has not yet realized the full potential for criticism in one very specific way. When I started out writing for free, for fanzines, one of them was Matter magazine. It was started by a young woman named Liz Phillip, who was attending journalism school at Northwestern. And her classmate was Steve Albini, and they both wrote for... You remember Matter, right, Jim?
Like the patron saint of cranky.
He makes me look cheerful and kind.
I love that guy.
Yeah. The way Matter dealt with really important records, like Double Nickels on a Dime by the Minutemen, or Husker Du Zen Arcade, or Let It Be by the Replacements, was there was a panel of critics. There were 5 or 6. And the lead critic wrote a 650-word review. And then the other 5 critics, each wrote like 300 words. And you got this incredible spectrum, because Steve Albini would say of the Replacements, bunch of drunken buffoons, listen to Small Faces, they were better. And, you know, Liz Phillip would coo of the Replacements. Paul Westerberg is so dreamy. Oh, my God, Answering Machine melts my heart. And earnest young Jim DeRogatis would write about, you know, going back to the 60s roots, but realized via punk and with, you know, a Kiss sensibility or some shit
And actually,
like
Small
that.
Faces are better.
Yeah, in retrospect. But Let It Be is a pretty damn good record.
Jim?
I agree.
Yes.
This is actually from Facebook, tweeted by me. This is from Koya.
That doesn't count.
Hey, I found it. She might, you know, it was Koya Paz. You know Koya. You don't know Koya Paz. But anyway, she says, and I think this is a good question, who gets to be a critic, and how are perceptions of aesthetic value racialized?
Okay, I couldn't figure out whether you said vocalized or racialized when you wrote that question down. I want to get to that question. That's an excellent question.
Racialized.
But why don't we do this on the net? Why don't we have 5 or 6 critics simultaneously weigh in so that the reader can get this incredible spectrum of opinion and decide who they want to side with. Albini, DeRogatis.
You know what?
Well, but we do
I'll tell you why. Because
we do in different places, but not in one
handy
place.
But that is in some ways the downside of the sort of, especially things like us who are just totally like half-assed and disorganized or whatever, is that without some sort of semi-professional or professional structure where you can actually get a bunch of people in a room and say, you write the 300-word one and you write the 650-word one, right? It just becomes a bunch of people individually sort of shouting into the wilderness. So I think that is a good example of how the blogosphere, podcast, and whatever the hell else does sort of diminish the complexity of the dialogue, because there's not that structure of being associated with a publication or an institution, because like if you're with an institution, you can be fringy and experimental because you're up against the man. Like if you're out in the fringe, like what are you up against? So I think that lack of formality is actually kind of detracts in some ways.
But I don't know. Here's what I think about that is that we do have that sort of plurality of opinion. It's just not all housed at the same URL, right?
It's all right up there. It's Twitter. It's what it is right there.
It is. When we had our initial conversation in this realm, 5 years ago, I was not yet on Twitter. Now
Twitter was even
Twitter was barely alive at that point. Yeah. But now I'm in daily conversation with theater critics in Chicago, around the country, all sort of in conversation and promoting each other's work to our individual audiences in a way that I think kind of creates and curates that critical conversation that you're talking about.
Yeah, but what's missing is the wonderful editing of a Sarah or a LaShawn and being put together as a package. I think Pop Matter actually comes closest to that ideal that I have in the terms of when your critics begin to each, somebody sets somebody else off, and the next thing you know, you have 3 or 4 reviews of one piece of work.
Yeah, we've done that. Yeah, we'll do a counterpoint. Yeah, we do that sometimes for big releases.
I always think of that tension between form and content is really valuable. A lot of people don't really understand what editors do, and the idea of writing well and writing grammatically and to word count. And early blogs were so messy. It was hard for someone like me to read them. I just wanted to correct them all the time. So I think now that people are valuing that. And I think that the harder you work on your writing, the clearer your thoughts. Don't you find that? You often don't know what you exactly are thinking until you have to put them into words, until you have to try and match the power of what you're describing with your own powers. There's some symbiotic thing that happens that's really exciting, and you have to search for that, and it's hard to do it if you're under too much pressure or if you're looking for the quick payoff instead of that deeper level.
I want to get to this Koya question, but I want to throw one to Mike really quickly. I wrote for The Reader for several years under Kiki Yablon. I've never had more rigorous editing anywhere. Does that still exist? And how has it benefited you?
Not like it did when Kiki was there. Not like it did when Kiki was there.
Not like
Kiki was badass.
Yeah.
Who
learned it from Allison, who was even better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They were contemporaries. No,
better ass. Yeah. That wouldn't have gotten past them. No.
Yeah. It's not the same. It's that we've contracted like every other media operation, but it's still pretty good. I have a great Mara, our editor in chief, edits me, and she's awesome, Mara Shellup. But it's definitely not. It's not gone over by like 3 proofreaders and a copy editor and an editor-in-chief anymore. Yeah. So you're forced to be more responsible for your own.
And it was a mixed blessing, right? Because it's incredibly aggravating to get 73 questions about a 150-word piece, but at the same time, you had this safety net. You knew that every word was right and every fact was correct.
Totally, and it was super aggravating when I was young and when I was new, and super frustrating. But I'm more grateful that it was there then than I am now, because I'm more, I'm more seasoned.
I can say, having just started at almost a year now at The Reader, that some of that I get edited by J.R. Jones the majority of the time. And when I first started writing for him, I've never had to do more rewrites on a 125-word capsule review. before, and he put me through the ringer. But you know, if I was good enough to write before the reader, I'm that much better of a writer now because of probably this old school editing style that you guys are referring to. It's probably lingering.
JR is old school. He's been there. He's been there for a long time.
Yeah, he's a hard
or
ass.
a correct editing
old
style if you prefer.
All right, so this question from Koya Paz is a serious one. Whoever wants to tackle it. Who gets to be a critic, and how are perceptions of aesthetic value racialized?
Is it, you know, the classic opinions are like assholes, everybody has one. I mean, that in some ways is the cool part of the sort of, I mean, you know, all the workers control the means of production. Like, you can now you could set up a blog or a podcast for very little money, and you can get your voice out there. Whether or not you build an audience is about your marketing, which is honestly what is so very, very important for so many people, and whether, you know, the regularity of your product and whether or not it has quality. And eventually you either will build an audience or you won't. So I don't know in that sense. I mean, I don't think that, you know, our audience doesn't know who writes, what color the people who write for our blog happen to be. You know, or who we are, because we're voices on a podcast. So, I mean, in theory, it's whether or not they find us entertaining or interesting, I would like to think. But who decides? You know, you decide. I mean, if you want to do it, do it. And if 5 people listen, like, we'd still do what we do if 5 people listened. Or if 50,000 listen, which will never, ever happen. So, I mean, you know, it's up to you. If you think you're going to make money, that's a different story entirely, and that's about the market and vetting and where you live and your experience, and that maybe race has more of a factor in that because it has a factor in most job situations. But honestly, in terms of the blogosphere and just doing it for the love of the game, it shouldn't be a factor at all.
What do we think Koya was asking about when she's asking about race and criticism?
Okay, as the colored gal up here, I'll jump in here.
I always thought Andrew was black. I hadn't met him.
Oh, yeah. Surprise, surprise. Sorry.
I'll start out, okay, I'll give an example of, I won't say the theater company. I'll just say that there is a theater company whose productions I have gone to review a lot. And I have become quite bored with them because they are the same over and over and over and over. So they are predominantly African American, and as am I. And I often would wrestle with, do I really bash them? Should I go soft? Do I bash them? Should I go soft? They're trying. I can't do that. I've decided that I cannot do that. I want to, I don't. I want to, I don't. But at the end, if I'm going to really do this, I cannot do that. I cannot go soft shoe on somebody that looks like me just for the sake of doing it. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. And once I got that, I went for it. And I just went for it, and I went for it. And they're not happy with me because they expect me to go soft on them. Not happy with me at all. And
just because it's a black theater company.
Yeah. But you're a critic. You're not the fan club newsletter. So good for you.
Absolutely. You know. Absolutely. Absolutely. But that was what I wrestled with because that's why we're here. I always said, well, I'm not a real critic, but yeah, I am. I have a voice. I've been with Gay vs. Black for almost 4 years. Yeah, I have a voice. I've been in the city writing, putting in the work. Yeah, I do have a voice.
Sarah, what are your thoughts? I mean, in terms of sheer diversity, in terms of age, you've got 70-year-olds writing for you.
No, we don't have 7-year-olds.
No, okay, some of the more academic seem.
We once had a 16-year-old though.
Okay,
and
all right.
Age, brilliant,
race, sex, you know.
All across the board and all over the world too. I mean, our comics editor is in South Africa. Let's see, Cindy Fuchs is in Washington D.C. We've got everybody. They're all over the place. Yeah, it's all the way from like people with advanced PhDs, postgraduate work, down to bachelors. You know, freshmen in college.
Yeah, and it's mainly people coming to you. They're desperate for an outlet.
Absolutely.
To write smartly about art.
Yeah. And we get a lot of young writers too who are recommended by the professors.
Okay.
So. When you say desperate for an outlet, I think one of the things that
desperate for an outlet people will read, not a free word. Yeah.
Exactly. But you know, I went back and looked at our previous discussion today in preparation for this, and one of the things that the points we sort of concluded on was that the act of criticism, or the act of aspiring to become a critic, is in a lot of ways just a just a really intensely expanded kind of fandom, right? Like you have to care a lot about the medium or the genre that you're writing about to put in the effort and to educate yourself and to to want to spread your own opinion. And I think a lot of us up here on stage today are kind of self-starters and got into it first as amateurs and first as kind of hobbyists and have found our ways to where we are now.
Well, I think every one of us, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a fine line, like as you expressed that too, just like some people, there are some people who are professional critics today, who are paid today, who still strike me as like just everything's great, everything's amazing, and that kind of puts us in a box of like, oh, critics don't like certain things or whatever. But some people are just a little too enthusiastic, and they aren't able to remove. There's an objective aspect to criticism. It's not the whole thing. It's probably impossible to be completely objective, but there is a certain aspect of removing your prejudices, avoiding your own personal taste, and also balancing, but keeping your prejudices and keeping like your own personal taste and sort of like making that
not
work.
prejudging.
Yeah. And something
exactly,
that, something that you
but
taught me.
it's impossible not to do that at the same time because we all have our hardline taste in things. So if we walk into something that we don't necessarily like in other, it's kind of hard to balance that. But what do you think?
Like I was speaking of, like as Columbia students, like what Jim taught us is that when you go into something, it's because you love it. Like you bash a movie because you love movies. You bash this album because you wanted it to be good. You go into a movie or you go into a show and you want it to be good. Like maybe this is an example from Jim. And maybe this will be the Britney Spears show where she surprises everyone and it's just amazing. You have to go in there thinking that. You can't go in there with this like preconceived notion. So when it is a letdown, you're disappointed. And so
letting something exist
don't
on its
you
own
want to say
terms.
it's like at some point in your life say it was Britney Spears' Finnegan's Way. It was deeply moving.
Yeah, and you were there for that. You were there for the moment that Britney Spears just like shattered the world with this performance. But
well, it's not inconceivable. I mean, here's this young woman who was twice institutionalized by the state of Chicago, twice the state of California, twice had her children taken away.
We're talking about Britney Spears, the performance artist,
yes,
right?
Was sexualized at age 8 by her mother. Fed into the Disney machine. It's like Billie Holiday and the tragedy in her life had nothing on Britney. All things considered. She could dig into that soul and give us cathartic art. Instead, she gives you "I'm a slave for you."
Well, the other thing is, aside from like the opening litany of negative criticism, which was hilarious to see read aloud, I think, and I assume the rest of you would agree with this, it's a lot harder to write a negative review that doesn't resort to that sort of like flamboyantness, because a negative review, you have to really dig in to explain why it's not working. It's way easier to say why something is working.
It's a lot. No, come on, now be truthful. Isn't it more fun to write a negative review?
When Don asked me to send in a
I know what these guys' answers going to be.
Don wanted me to send in a scathing review, and it took me a long time to find a really scathing one that I thought was scathing on a deeper note. I mean, I can make fun of Billy Corgan until the sun goes down, but it's not a deep, critique of his art.
I think the worst
talking about what a silly person he is as a human being.
It's like making fun of the Republican Party, though. I mean,
it's an easy target.
It's too easy. Fish in a barrel.
Airplane food.
Yeah.
I really am looking forward to Britney Spears as like King of Carrot Flowers.
You have to think that it's possible, or you should get out of the game.
I wonder. I used to. I no longer take any pleasure in writing a negative review about a restaurant I've eaten at several times. I mean, it's no longer fun for me. There was a time where it was, but now I just want really good experiences and I want to write about them. And I wonder. I think about with something Anthony Bourdain said on your show, that food critics should have term limits, and I wonder if that's part of it.
If all critics should have term limits.
I'm sick of eating bad meals, and I'm sick of writing about them. I mean, nothing pleases me more to be super surprised about something and to write a great review about it, or to expect something to be really great and write a great review about it. But I don't know. I don't take any pleasure in just slamming a place anymore.
I think it's what's worse more than anything is something that I encounter a lot in reviewing films is stuff that's not amazing and it's not horrible. It's just so ambivalent about form and about content and about what it's trying to do. It's literally like people like to use the analogy of like a Burger King glass. You go and you get a Happy Meal and you get a toy and you get this stuff, and it's just so inconsequential to a greater picture. And that's worse, is when you walk into a movie and it's literally nothing. it's not even bad, because then you can sort of talk about it, and didn't even try to be anything either. It's like if a film tries for something and then fails and it's bad, that's so much better than something that just kind of exists on a screen. You know,
well, and at least it's over in 85 minutes for you. Donna's got to read 600 pages.
You'd be surprised how many movies reach that 2-hour mark, especially in yeah. I think Safe Haven was this one movie I saw that is really existing in my mind right now as an example of that. I think it was like...
How long is freaking Les Miserables, Chris? About 17 and a half hours, right?
Well, you know, you learn a lot from failures. I mean, you have to kind of sharpen your mind against them. What's wrong with it? Why is it bad? But I'm with you. I don't want to do that. I want to have a good experience.
So Richard and I talk mostly, and I find bad reviews, we just amp each other up. So it's like one says something stupid and harsh and brutal and mean and dismissive and pithy, and the other one thinks, oh, I can top that. And so we just, like, bad reviews are delightful in that, like, it's an opportunity to, like, sharpen your knife and your comedy chops. On the other hand, when you like something, you don't want to be like, oh my God, that painting dropped me to my knees and I welled up a little bit, because you're like, I sound like an idiot.
I know what Mike's saying, though. What kind of twisted masochists would we be to want to go out and say, tonight I hope I have a horrible, shitty time at Main Stage. I hope that's the longest, worst 2 hours of my life. I can't wait to be in torment. Right? I mean, nobody is like that. We want every experience to be great.
Well, and I mean, kidding aside, and Duncan and I, at least in our conversation, certainly amp each other up, but we did sort of make a policy decision early on with what we do, because in essence we are the fan club newsletter, because we are not paid, nor do we, we lose money on this deal. But we I mean, we've seen things that were just fucking horrible, and we generally just decide, like, unless we can articulate in a thoughtful, coherent way why it was fucking horrible, like, we just don't bother, because it's like beating up on somebody, at least particularly in the visual arts, because it's such a lone undertaking in a lot of ways. It's easy and it's mean and it doesn't get anywhere. I mean, I think that if we can sort of, in a critical analysis way, maybe offer something useful, but I think it's we decided early on to not just bash away.
Or do sometimes you let the commenter speak up on it?
Yes.
You write your piece, give it out to the world, and see what everybody else has to say about it.
So you are doing that thing I said from Matter magazine and throwing it out. I mean, one of the things I find extraordinary about Pitchfork, to pick on them last time, I'm sorry, is what does every blog, every website on the net have? A comment section, and yet they don't. How strange is that? You're going to come out and say a piece of art is a 7.1, whatever that means, and yet you're not going to let anybody else say anything ever.
The final word.
Why don't we wrap all this up? So, 5 years ago, Chris did this. Me and Donna and Don Hall, who's up there, were part of it. Are we going to be here 5 years? Are you personally, each of you, going to be here doing what you do still in 5 years? Andrew?
I hope, yeah. I hope so.
Big Short Drive's here to stay.
We're going to be here to stay, absolutely.
Sarah?
Definitely.
You've been doing it too long to stop now.
Yeah, since 1999, so.
LaShawn, are we going to not have editors anymore?
Oh, no. You always need editors.
Are you going to get paid to be an editor?
Oh, God. Oh, you've got to have editors. Got to have editors. Got to have editors. I'm sorry. I'm just really, really...
Well, I'm with you. I just think I'm enough of a capitalist, though I'm slightly to the left of Noam Chomsky. I'm enough of a capitalist to believe you should get paid for working hard. Okay.
Absolutely.
Drew?
God willing, yes.
I'm a complete addict.
This actually plays into a counterpoint I wanted to make to Mike's term limits thing, which is institutional memory. I mean, the longer that you are able to stick around writing about something like theater or about local music or food, the more knowledge you bring and the more context you bring. I'm curious about what you tweeted. But I think that...
What did I miss, Don? What did we miss?
They gave us 37 out of 53 stars.
Oh, weird.
Okay. So
I just want to point out that Joe Janes gave the panel discussion 37 out of 53 stars.
Oh, okay.
Just so you feel good
what
about
is that
that
on the 10-point scale?
Yeah. Anyway, short answer,
crazy
yes,
talk.
I'm still here.
Hope you're still here. And we hope you're still paid as well. One of 6 so far remaining, right? All right.
Richard and I have a blood oath to get to week 520 of the podcast. We're at 397.
No, 400 this week.
This is 400. So for 120 more weeks for sure, but I'm pretty sure 5 years.
Okay.
Without a sweat.
And Tankboy mentioned earlier that we were a little too fixated on Britney Spears. Duncan has moved on to Selena Gomez, just so everybody knows.
What was that
She
weird?
was so great in that movie.
What was that weird sculpture of Britney giving birth that made a big?
Oh my God! I was the
splash
attorney for that art fair.
Really?
I have to have a conversation about that. That was a fucking nightmare.
And just for the record, Britney was crowning in a kind of what do we call it? Like a child's pose.
You know what?
I think what we'd call that.
We can leave it at that.
It was no piss Christ. That's all I'll say.
Oh, piss Christ! I have a good Andre Serrano story actually. He groped a friend of mine at a party.
Leah? It was me.
Oh, okay. Well, as far as critics still being around, I think that the outpouring after Ebert's passing blew me away, and I think it proves that people, they care about their critics and they mean something in their lives. So I hope it does stay around.
You have to be dead for them to admit it, though.
But does our generation have an Ebert, though? I mean,
that's a good question.
I mean, he's from a different realm of journalism. I mean, the Royko, Ebert, sort of that era, the golden age of Chicago journalism. I live in fear that it's gone.
We have Jim.
I don't know about that.
Did you ever know that you're my hero?
No, I mean, all of us get emails from people that say what you wrote meant something. And as long as that still keeps, and I ain't going to pay your rent, but it's like, Tankboy, you've been doing it a long time now.
I've been doing this 23, 24 years. So at this point, it kind of gets harder as you go along, but I can't imagine stopping for at least the next 20, 25 years.
Less than nothing.
I hope it continues with or without me, but what Kris said about institutional memory, I think is incredibly important. It's not really something we addressed vis-a-vis Yelp and those sorts of things. And also with regard to that, just the ability to communicate an idea in an interesting and entertaining and legible way.
Well, since you freaked us all out about expressing doubt about being able to continue as a food writer, but you wouldn't stop writing, right? I mean, you're much too.
No.
good.
I started as a feature writer, and
okay,
and I'll
I think that's an important distinction. You know, I mean.
Not to turn the audience lights on and say it's you, the audience, who's the fifth member of the band. But I mean, I do think that having people out there to exchange ideas with and who are part of that dialogue with you, be it through feedback or whatever. I mean, I think that is what keeps it going. And I mean, for us who aren't getting paid and lose money on the deal, like the fact that we get to interact with people who are familiar with our work and either hate us or like us, I mean, is really what makes it worthwhile. And that's very exciting for us.
All right. Well, that's a good place to end. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you, BEZ. Thank you, Main Stage.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Selena Gomez is legal now, Duncan, so, those pictures you have are okay.
Were you looking that up?